Several times in my time in Raleigh, I would walk into my boss's office after one of these briefings, because he always liked to hear the little war stories about what happened, and Marvin Mann would be there. Now, Marvin Mann was one of the very key guys in this whole project. He was on the marketing side at the beginning, as he was in the time I'm going to relate to, and later on he headed up the development program for the early IBM cash registers. Later on he went to work in printers and other things too, but at this point it was in cash registers. He looked at my boss and he said, "I thought we were going to have Selmeier go find out how much source marking there was and when it was going to get better." Okay, so then Bill turns to me and says, my boss says, "Bill, why don't you do that?" And so I said, "Okay." Well, unfortunately at that time, IBM store system salesmen weren't as busy as they could be selling product to their customers because of some of the product issues and just lack of source marking. The industry was going very slow on the whole thing. So we took all the IBM salesmen and we identified who the top people were. Now what we really did was, I got a call out of White Plains telling me that the next time I was in Chicago, I should go over and see SAMI, which SAMI was a group underneath the Time Life organization called Selling Areas Marketing Incorporated. What they really did is they collected all the item movement from major grocery chains, and then they consolidated it together, and like Nielsen, they sold that information back to grocery manufacturers. So they had a lot of really credible information about who sold how much in the stores. And next time in Chicago, I went over to see SAMI, and they gave me a 2,400-foot reel of tape that had the entire item movement for the United States for, I think, a 2-week period or something like that. And on the airplane home, I wrote an APL program because I thought APL was kind of cute as a programming language. And it mystified this data, and it broke the data down and said, here's how much by item brand all the way along. I found out Procter & Gamble on its own in those days was 2.5% of all the item movement in the United States. Far and away the biggest seller, and of course that made me pretty interested in Procter & Gamble. But we learned about all these things. We also, because we've been talking to the guys coming to these briefings, we've been able to get a pretty good handle on the process of implementing the U.P.C. So we could understand it all started with a decision to do it, and that generally took so much time. And then there was the artwork phase, and that took so much time. And then there was the getting the packaging material, the raw packaging material, and running out the old packaging material because no one throws it out. And so that took so much time. And then you get down to, well, now you're packing it, but it's really going into first your warehouse, and that'll take a while, and then a grocery warehouse, and that'll take a while. And finally, after all these steps, you'll start seeing it on grocery shelves. And so we had these times for what it would be. And we sent the IBM salesmen, who were being underutilized at the time, out to talk to the top 87 grocery manufacturers with a list of the brands and sizes that we wanted to know, where do each one of these stand? And the grocery industry was fantastic. They told us, we're here, we're here, we're here, we're here. And if there were, we got a one or two that said, you know, it's really consider that privileged information. Yeah. So we just kind of said, okay, that means you're here. Yeah. We also got some interesting questions, like we went to Procter & Gamble and asked them about Tide, and they said, which Tide? Well, Tide large. Which Tide large? And it turns out for some brands, there's like 4 or 5 different packages because they're tuning that brand to geography. The water is hard in the Rocky Mountain states. It's very soft in New England, so Tide is different in those 2 locations. And we had to learn what kind it was and how much was it. They were very helpful and provided all the information. So it was, we took all that brought it down. When we went to the FMI show, I guess I have a side of me that likes to be cute too. I called this Operation Market, M-A-R-K-IT, and we gave all the IBM people in the booth a card that said, by every 3 months, what % of the stores we thought would be source marked. And it turned out to be very close to reality.